Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Another day, another hearing. More of the, testimony that's going to... Let me start right from the beginning. I said at the start, no one was going to be held accountable for January 6th. No one of any consequence. It's my belief that we don't hold our elites accountable, but I don't say this often, and my wife will attest to this. I don't do this often. I might be wrong here. I may. I've said this is the corruption here. That administration. I said on Inauguration Day 2017, this is going to be the most corrupt administration in the history of the country. I said that they're going to do things that we will never be able to fully gather our senses around. The criming will be amazing. It will be historic. It will be something generations will look back on and go, how did you let that happen? And I'm looking at this going, I was not wrong there. Where I may be wrong is the evidence. Oh my gosh. Mounting in big ways. Now, will we hold someone accountable? I'm kind of maybe possibly backing up on the never. I'm not saying yes, but I'm saying possibly. So I didn't say I was wrong. I'm saying I'm possibly maybe going to be wrong, and we might hold someone accountable. And that's a huge win. And I said from the beginning, I want to be wrong on this. So this is a positive. But here's the thing. I'm looking at the 45 administration, most corrupt ever, more corrupt than Watergate. And look, the Republican sequel to subverting democracy, much more explosive than Watergate, much more dangerous. You remember all during the 45 years, all during Cult 45's time in office, we kept hearing about how he was going to drain the swamp. Remember that? I talked about it all during his tenure. And I kept saying, yeah, maybe they are draining the swamp because it needs it. Absolutely. But they're draining the swamp and they're filling it with much uglier, much meaner, much nastier, much more hateful to democracy monsters. And guess what? Yeah, look at what you are seeing before you in this hearing. Listen to the things that these people are saying. And again, I come back to these are the very best people. These are all of the inner circle of the Trump world. These are all of the conservative intelligentsia. These are all the dyed-in-the-wool, die-hard GOP operatives. These are the faithful. These are the people who have brought us all of the bad policy, all of the horrible things that Republicans have been fighting for. This is them. And this is them saying they broke the law. I mean, the Hirschman, that attorney, he's a giant. Fill in the blank. And had some great lines, had some really great lines. And honest with them. But if there was a way forward to subvert democracy, and he would have been on board. There wasn't. And I think Benny Thompson laid it out. Trump lost. Trump knew he lost. Everyone around him told him he lost. Everyone around him knew he lost. Everyone around him repeatedly told him he lost. He didn't care. He was going to hold on to power and use every possible lever. And if that means destroying the DOJ to do it, if that means using the Attorney General to do that, he was going to do it. And here we are. The smoking gun, as they're now saying, evidently my congressman, Scott Perry, at the center of it. And I've never been a Scott Perry fan by any stretch of the imagination, but Scott Perry was behind the whole push to get Jeffrey Clark, who is now being... No wonder Jeffrey Clark pled the fifth throughout his entire testimony, because he's the smoking gun. The testimony we heard today was of a climber, of a guy nobody liked or nobody thought had any intelligence whatsoever, but willing to do anything that Donald Trump, a lackey, a wannabe, somebody just smart enough to get himself into a whole bunch of trouble. And oh, guess what? In a whole bunch of trouble, because guess what happened today? Guess what happened at pre-dawn this morning? That's right. Federal investigators knocked on Jeffrey Clark's door and took a bunch of his stuff because they showed up with warrants and they began collecting things. Because here's the thing. After today's hearing, after the January 6th, you know what was going to be happening at the Clark home if they didn't go and gather whatever's left. And look, if Clark was a good attorney, if he was smart, if he was at least half smart, he would have burnt everything already. That would have happened a while ago. But today they went to find if there are any electronic devices that still may have some of those texts, some other stuff on there to basically prosecute him with. I think he is the one who's he's in trouble. He's in trouble big. Yeah. Now, good thing. Liz Cheney must have been listening to the program last night because she spoke music to my ears. After today, they're going to be going after and looking at where the funding came from, who funded all this, who was behind it, where the money is. That is a huge thing. She also spoke to MAGA World. She said, look, it can be difficult to accept that Trump abused your trust. It can be tough. Many will invent excuses to ignore the facts, she said. But that is the fact. I wish it weren't true, but it is. And that's the reality. And I've had a lot of my MAGA friends go, well, every other justification. No, broke the law. And if you were one of the people screaming, drain the swamp, if you had the drain the swamp sign, the swamp is deep. The swamp has ugly monsters in it. Jeffrey Clark, Donald Trump, they're in it. Now, Adam Kinzinger on Trump said he was willing to sacrifice our republic to prolong his presidency. I can imagine no more dishonorable act by a president. I'm sure we're going to get to a lot more dishonorable acts that are coming. Because here's the thing. I'm sure as we speak, as we're having this little back and forth, Brutus is twisting the blade into Caesar's back as we speak. I guarantee Jeffrey Clark is singing right now. I wouldn't even doubt if Scott Perry is singing. Didn't get his pardon. He should be worried. I wouldn't doubt he's singing. And like I said, I said there was no way that Trump would be charged. But looking at what came out today, looking what came out on Tuesday, oh my gosh. I given everything that's been presented, there have to be charges. There have to be people going to jail. There has to be accountability. There has to be a series of perp walks. This is, and as we said at the beginning of these hearings, are these hearings for the American people? Are these hearings for purely partisan politics? Are they for the silent majority of people who don't weigh in on polling or anything? Or is it for the audience of one, Merrick Garland, to get him to do his job, to push him further and to make him, again, we'll find out the answer to those questions as it goes on. But here's the thing. Given everything that we've seen, given all of the evidence that's come out thus far, I don't know how we can move forward as a country without there being some form of criminal charges, without somebody being held to account. Because we have all this criming, all of this happening. And then to just go, well, we're going to get a mulligan. No, that's not how that's not how this should work. Now, the weird thing is what we're seeing is orange privilege. And I say that because Trump really, and the Trump sphere, they all during his time in office were criming the entire time and getting away with it in full view of the public. the perfect phone call, all of the stuff that went on with Russia. All of that stuff was right out in full. And the reason a lot of people, it's all a hoax, is because they were doing it right out in public. And I had a friend years ago who was he was a thief. That was his job. He wasn't very good at it. He got caught a lot, but it was his, it's what he did for a couple of years. And he said, the best thieves are the ones who you don't know are stealing. They act like they own the place. They walk in, they take things, they actually make other people carry things out for them. That's how in control of a situation they are. And this is the kind of thing that Trump is masterful at. He normalizes the criming to where, no, what you think is a crime is only a crime for those people, those little people. We with orange privilege, we can get away with this and never be held accountable. This is going to be an interesting moment. Going to be an interesting moment to see if there is going to be any accountability. Now, like I said, I think Jeffrey Clark is singing like a bird. I think the 125 times plus that he pled the fifth during his time speaking to the committee, going to be interesting if he goes back on some of those and starts filling in the details, which is why they're taking a pause from future hearings to go, okay, bombshells. Let's see where things fall out. Interesting testimony. Nobody likes Jeffrey Clark. Nobody. And I can see that. Nobody's going to like the guy who's kind of the rat, who's kind of the backstabber, who's kind of the I'll do anything. Yeah, I'll fire everybody. I'll do whatever you want. Just put me in charge. I liked with one of the witnesses, Richard Donahue said that he wasn't competent enough to run the Justice Department. Clearly not competent enough. Hirschman, I think, said that he was an environmental lawyer and he knew nothing about elections, but I think he knew something that they both began with E, and he's not even sure that he knows that. And the other line was, go back to your office and we'll call you when there's an oil spill. It was a bombshell day, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Is this a big deal in your world? Was this a moment where you go, again, so much more information? Italian satellites we found out about. Italian satellites. The number of Republicans who sought pardons. My congressman was the one who had been outed early, Scott Perry, begging for a pardon because he knew he was criming. But we now know Andy Biggs, Mo Brooks, who's probably going to be singing very soon since he's not going to have a job. And, he's been heavily implicated here. Matt Gaetz, who's always begging for a pardon. Louis Go-Go Gohmert. And I guess Marjorie Trainwreck Green, she's asked for one too. Wow. Now, here's the other thing. They're all denying it because, of course. But think about if they had the audacity to ask for a pardon in a moment when they were dealing with the president, knowing what they were asking the president, they were telling the president they were willing to do. If they had the foresight to think that needed a pardon because that was criming, do you think they were going to tell the truth? Do you think? The answer, no. But I got lots to get to on this. I want to get your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Going to take a quick break. Right back with your calls. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Did you watch the big hearing today? Was it as big of a deal as I think today was? Today, really, even bigger than Tuesday, I think. Wow. Got an email from Bonnie asking if Trump was charged with crimes, what would those crimes be? The first things, Bonnie, I would go with I'll get to it. I'm so there. Obstruction of justice being one of them, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to defraud. Now that's the harder one, I think, to prove, to get past. The hurdle obviously going to be really high, as it should be, and that should be a trial. For all of my friends go, well, you're going to have to write to call witnesses and all that. Absolutely. And that trial should be publicly televised in prime time. And every Trump witness should be under oath. Interesting watching all of the people, the best people, what they said at the Four Seasons Landscaping press conference and what they said under oath. Very different worlds. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are you?
I'm pretty good. How about yourself?
Living the dream. What's on your mind? Did you see the big to-do today?
Yes, I did. And, I knew a lot of it, and I'm sure a lot of other people did. The part I missed, though, was the Italian satellites. And calling, can you imagine what the man in Rome thought that received the phone call about I was like, oh, my God. I was just,
Yeah. There's an Italian defense contractor. He's uploading software to the satellite to switch votes to Biden because the Italians had so much invested in this.
I know. I thought, I can just picture someone sitting there and looking over at someone else and getting off the phone and going, you're not going to believe this one. Oh, I'm surprised that, anybody in the free world wants anything to do with us after all that.
Yeah, and look, my congressman, Scott Perry, texting Mark Meadows saying, why can't we just work with the Italian government? You've got security clearance. Freaking,
I know.
I think he was like a lieutenant general or something. This is a guy who was pretty high up in our military. This is somebody who's... deep breath. Breathe.
My husband and I just sat there and looking at each other, and we're going, really? I mean, how much? I'm going, I know it can get crazier, but at this point, I think the best thing to do would just bring in a whole bunch of straitjackets and just take, about 75% of the Republicans off to Gitmo. Claim they're domestic. Well, they are domestic terrorists, but haul them off there and give them some electroshock therapy because they need it.
Ouch. Thanks, Alice. I appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. You have a good evening.
You too. I appreciate it. The other thing that grabbed my attention, and it was a passing thing at the very beginning, that Bill Barr was giving his testimony. Now, Barr's testimony, I would like to see these. This is one of those things where I'm kind of, I don't have all the hours in the world, but I would love to watch some of the testimony of a couple of these people from start to finish. Barr's being one of them. Now, Barr was saying that he had done what attorney generals haven't done in the past. They got preactively. Let's get to it. I'm so. This today was such a big deal. I think that this could be that changer in this country, that maybe we start going, no, we've got a problem. Houston, there's a problem. But Barr got proactively involved in this from the beginning to look into the claims of voter fraud. And look, I'm not going to give Barr credit for being a hero or anything like that. I think he was saving his own skin. I think this was all about self-preservation. I think it was all about his own behind. But he was at least smart enough to know we better figure out what it is they're scheming to protect ourselves. This is all about self-preservation. So he got involved. They checked all of the claims of voter fraud, of all of the things that Trump was claiming to him that he needed to look at it, and they found nothing. It was all baseless. Whereas in the past, attorneys generals would have just let it off to the future. They would have litigated it down the road. What he said, had that happened, he believes, had that been the position that he would have taken, his quote was, "I sort of shudder to think what the situation would have been if the position of the department was, we're not even going to look into this until Biden's after Biden's in office." And he goes on to say that, frankly, I think the fact is I put myself in a position that I could say we looked into everything and we didn't think that there was fraud. It was really important. He then says, if we didn't do this, I don't think there would have been a transition. Stop and just let that sink in for a second. The former attorney general is saying, I'm not sure we would have had a transition at all. Now, I argue, there was no actual transition of power. Biden came in, he had to pick up from, on day one from square one. That happened. What he's saying is Trump would have never relinquished power. This would have been a constitutional crisis. This would have been a military crisis in his view. This is what he's saying. This is a big deal. And the question then becomes, as a country, because I've thought this through a couple of times, where do we fall in this? Had our institutions not held barely, had Mike Pence left the parking garage, had they gotten away with one sliver of this to where on January 21st, Trump is not leaving the office, what happens? Does the military have to step in? Do we now have a military coup? And which side do you think they fall on? And why do you think the attack on Mark Milley was so important? Why do you think the discrediting of those generals was going on at the time? Understand, these people, and it's going to get, trust me, it's going to get deeper. There's going to be more to this story. The swamp, deep. The monster is ugly. None of these people are heroes. These people are saving their skin because they know what they were doing was wrong. They knew what they were encountering was horribly wrong. In fact, they talked about it. They talked about that, how much criming this was, and there were people who didn't care. Trump being at the heart of don't care. Incredible stuff. Just fascinating. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Also, if you miss any of our program, make sure you download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, from Stitcher to iTunes, Podbean, anywhere in between. Get the podcast. Share, subscribe, like, comment, all of that. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day the despised Taft-Hartley Act became law. It was a direct retaliatory response to the 1946 post-war strike wave, where millions walked off the job after waiting years for basic demands. The labor movement mobilized against the slave labor bill through numerous rallies. The AFL joined the CIO in threatening 24-hour strikes across whole industries in protest as the bill wound its way through Congress. 11,000 soft coal miners in Pennsylvania walked out in a spontaneous protest strike earlier in the month. The bill passed over the veto of President Harry S. Truman, who would invoke it a dozen times over the course of his presidency. Many union leaders hailed Truman as a friend of labor for his 11th hour veto. Labor Party advocates were incensed that of the 219 congressional Democrats, 126 voted in favor of the bill. Practically overnight, the labor movement had been pushed back 25 years. Taft-Hartley was nothing short of disastrous for the American labor movement. With the stroke of a pen, the act criminalized many of the actions key to historic Union victories in the 30s and 40s. Jurisdictional strikes, secondary boycotts, solidarity strikes, closed shops, and mass picketing were just a few of the most basic trade union activities now outlawed. The act helped fire the first shots of the McCarthy Red Scare by mandating that union officers file non-communist affidavits with the government, which was later found to be unconstitutional. The act also provided the ammunition needed to strangle strikes by empowering the president to easily acquire strike-breaking injunctions. And it allowed for the rapid growth of right-to-work laws at the state level. And because of Taft-Hartley, the union movement has suffered ever since.
Right before our eyes, an invaluable American species is fast disappearing from view. Cartoonus americanus. These are newspaper cartoonists who've long delighted readers and infuriated power elites. And there's nothing natural about their sudden decline. It's not the result of a dwindling talent pool, and certainly not due to a lack of political targets. Rather, what's happening is that their media habitat is being intentionally destroyed. Around the start of the 20th century, some 2,000 newspapers featured their own full-time cartoonists. But in just the last decade, those healthy media environments have shriveled. So now, only a couple of dozen newspapers have these vibrant artistic journalists on staff. One major reason is that most U.S. papers have been gobbled up by profiteering hedge funds that have merged, purged, and plundered these essential local sources of news and democratic discourse. The overriding interest of these Wall Street owners is to cash out a paper's financial assets and haul off the booty to boost their personal wealth. Journalism and democracy be damned. Thus, they view cartoonists as a paycheck that can be easily diverted into their corporate pockets, dismissing the fact that enjoying good local cartoonists ranks as one of the top reasons people give for buying the paper. Note that this mass extermination is not old-school media censorship, but sleight-of-hand money censorship by the new monopolistic order of newspapering. Political cartoonists are still free to express any opinion they want, but the Wall Street system locks them out of their primary marketplace. Censorship is ugly, but eliminating paychecks, well, that's just business. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet these freewheeling spirits of the cartooning craft are inventing new ways to connect with America's strong demand for their fun and important work. To connect with them, go to editorialcartoonist.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, again, I'm looking at the list of the crimers who sought preemptive pardons. And you go, you generally don't ask for things like, hey, can you pardon me in advance? Thou shalt not ask for pardons. Unless you have committed a crime. I think that's kind of simple, no? Anyway, we find out that Marjorie Trainwreck Green was one of them. Mo Brooks, Matt Gaetz, Louis Go-Go Gohmert, Andy Biggs, and we knew about my congressman, Scott Perry. Matt Gaetz, I could take Matt Gaetz off this list because he's always asking for pardons for all of the other crimes. So I don't know how influential he was in January 6th. Because I don't think anyone takes him seriously. I think he's just got a whole line of other things probably he's begging for pardons on. So in this, maybe I'm going to give him just a little, I don't know, maybe a little pass because he's in so much other trouble. But the rest of them, I think we should call them in for under oath and ask why. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the big hearing. Was today the big deal that I think it was? Was it the BFD that I'm thinking it was? So I've asked my good friend Sarah Burris to come share some thoughts with us. Sarah's a fantastic reporter over at Raw Story. Rawstory.com, the website, if you want to check out her incredible work. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, happy Thursday.
So let's start with the pardons. Would you be seeking a pardon unless you thought, hey, what I'm doing might not be above boards?
I feel like we kind of had this conversation once before about Scott Perry, where it's like, remember whenever Sheriff Joe Arpaio was really mad that he got pardoned, and that meant that because you're pardoned, you have to admit that you're guilty of something. And so he took it to court, and he was like, but I don't want to admit my guilt. And then finally the court was just like, bro, you got to admit your guilt. I mean, we're not here to try and relitigate your case. We're just here to give you a pardon, and accept it, don't accept it. It's entirely up to you. So I feel like that's kind of the court explaining to everybody, hey, to accept a pardon, you have to also admit that you have committed a crime. And in the case of Matt Gaetz, my favorite quote from Hirschman was that Matt Gaetz asked for the pardon from like the beginning of time. Like that was his barometer for like when he wanted the things that he crimed.
Yeah, can I have a pardon from birth, please?
And at that point, you're just like, dude, what did you do?
No, and
because I think you're right. I don't know that he necessarily was asking for a pardon for this specifically, but I'm wondering if he just saw this as a really great opportunity to be like, hey, can you give me a pardon? It just happens to be a much broader pardon. But it's for September. It's for January 6th. So.
Can you give my family tree a pardon? Everyone before me and everyone after, can we just have a blanket immunity from anything, from all of the crimes I've now committed or will commit or have ever committed? Because that's what it seems like for him. But for the rest of them, I mean, I look at the names on this list, and if this is your gang of criminals,
I mean, that's unfortunate. And the email that Mo Brooks sent out that he said was part of Matt Gaetz' request, it said something about that they wanted a blanket pardon for all of the Republicans who, did this or that because of the socialist Democrats. And I'm just like, wow, you really want a blanket pardon for all Republicans? Do you not understand how bad that looks for you? Like, this is you as a party basically saying, yes, we crimed like a mother, and we will probably crime again.
Yeah, but was that Mo Brooks or was that Gaetz?
So Mo Brooks said that in the email he said he was forwarding it on behalf of Matt Gaetz.
Okay, so it's the both of them actually. But right. I look at Mo Brooks and Mo, I'm sure Mo's singing. I mean, I look at Jeffrey Clark, and I've predicted Jeffrey Clark right now is singing like a prison. You know what? I mean, he's telling every tale right now because it looks like Jeff's in big trouble.
Definitely. And the thing that a lot of the legal nerds were talking about today, that they think that the Jeff Clark stuff is about the January 6th stuff. And I don't think that it is. I think that the reason they raided his house is because of the fake electors scheme, because he was part of that whole idea. And so this, and that has been, we know that that's at the Justice Department, and they just handed out a whole bunch of subpoenas yesterday of Republicans who were fake electors. So I wonder if that's actually part of that team, and they haven't even touched on the other stuff yet.
Wow. Let me ask a dumb question. How bad of a lawyer is Jeffrey Clark if he still has anything to do with any of that stuff? I mean, because look, I'm not the brightest bulb in the box. I'm just a dumb truck driver. But here's the thing. If I had criminal stuff laying around, emails, if I had, electronic devices with photographs and recordings of me criming, I would get rid of them long ago. Now, I know that's a crime too, and I would be admitting to that, but I haven't done any criming. But if let's just say I'm one of the treasonous folks who are trying to overthrow our government, I think all of the stuff that I recorded for future generations to praise me over, now that I've been caught, I think I would get rid of.
Yeah, so it's only a crime if you have already been subpoenaed. So if he had been subpoenaed and then he talked stuff, then it's a crime. My assumption is maybe he was keeping a whole bunch of stuff to write a book, a lot of
his wife's a scrapbooker.
Yeah, right. There exactly. He wanted to put him
you want to document your treason.
Yeah, like do some stickers and some punch outs and glitter pins. And hey, I know the scrapbooking world. I don't participate, but I know it. And so I think that's what that maybe that's what Jeff Clark was doing. I also wonder if the DOJ was bringing him in because they were like, oh crap, they're about to, trash Jeff Clark on the Hill today. Maybe we should grab him before he has a chance to, delete all of his stuff. That could be a possibility, but I don't know. I mean, I really don't think that the DOJ has even started on getting to the Trump piece of this, the White House piece of this yet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they can't at this moment with everything that's come out. I don't know. I said at the beginning, originally I said there's no way we're going to hold Trump or any of the higher ups accountable. They're all going to skate on this because it's what we do in this country. I've now kind of stepped back a little bit, going all the stuff that we're seeing. I don't know. I don't know how we can't in this moment not hold someone accountable. I just because it'll just make it. It will guarantee that this happens again.
Absolutely. And I would say, too, one of the things that I saw today was former Attorney General Eric Holder. Holder is not the most progressive guy, that we've had in a White House position in an agency. He's pretty moderate. And he was furious today and was like straight up saying we need to indict Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And was making the case online. And I was just like, you don't see former attorney generals, basically dictating this is what the DOJ should do on the internet or publicly at all. And so the fact that he did that as somebody who's pretty conservative, I was shocked by that. And I think that's a really big tell for, stuff's going to happen.
Something has to happen. Because here's the thing. It then becomes political malpractice in the future if you don't do these things. I'm going to run for office at some point in the future, and I'm going to blame Italian satellites if I lose. It's no longer people didn't want to vote for me. It's I won by millions of votes, and it was Italian satellites, and it was everything other than what it was. And this is why this is so important, and why I focus so much attention on this, and I think why the committee has focused so much attention on it.
Yeah, because this is some of the scariest things that have ever happened in our country. The way that Adam Kinzinger talked about it is you have guardrails for democracy, but whenever you're driving down the highway and you see dents in the guardrails, that's kind of what happened here. I don't know about you, but I've seen like broken guardrails and people flying through them. So I mean, I got my perspective.
Yeah, this is a fiery dumpster going over the edge. I mean, this is bad. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. If you got a question, comment, something you want to ask Sarah, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. The other thing that I came away from this with, the more I'm watching the presentation of these hearings, the more I now want to see more. This has been like, for me, it's been almost like must see TV. There are a couple of the interviews, Hirschman, for instance. I want to see the entire interview with Hirschman. I want to see the entire Bill Barr interview. There are a bunch of these I think we need access to, and I think that should happen.
I agree. I think that would be a brilliant thing for for the committee to start uploading stuff like that on their YouTube channel after all of the hearings are over. I know for certain there are at least 2 more hearings that will be in July, and Benny Thompson today said that they will. The first one will be on radical domestic terrorism. So, all of these people who have been linked to different militia groups and whatnot. And then his second comment was, his second hearing, he said it was 187 minutes. So is that the 187 minutes that Trump didn't act? Or is that the entirety of the attack? Or I'm not sure what the 187 minutes was, what that reference was to.
Now Liz Cheney did say something that was music to my ears, that they're going to go after and look into who funded all of this stuff. And it's something from the beginning, from January 6th until just a couple minutes ago, I've been saying I want to know who funded this. Granted, I don't care that much about who defecated on the floor or urinated on Nancy Pelosi's desk or broke windows. We'll get to them. I want to know the people who are in the background. I want to know the people who are funding all of these characters. I want to know the people who are beholden, are these congressmen who are begging for pardons, who they're beholden to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think one of the major things that some of the members have been talking about is this hotline that they have. And so ever since they started doing these hearings, they've been getting like more and more and more information. So you wonder, like, are folks watching this hearing go down and now they're starting to come forward about more of that stuff? Are there folks who know some of the funders who are like, yeah, I know this guy, or I got money from this party, or, whatever. I wonder if some of those folks are starting to sing. What Jamie Raskin and Adam Schiff both said is that call-in line is basically ringing off the hook, and that they have got tons more information than they knew before.
Well, because right now you're seeing a pivot. I think we're seeing the pivot away from Trump. I think they're ready to throw him under the bus. I don't think he's well liked by Republicans. I think that came out in 15 and 16. It's just that he had the power of all of the minions who have followed along, the cult behind him. But as the cult wakes up to the reality that they've been duped, that they bought the flag and the hat, and they bought into the message, and that it's not what they bought into. I think there will be there's clearly happening right now a pivot to throw Trump under the bus.
I think too a big part of it is you're starting to see Republicans who are running for office have made it through their primaries. So if they beat a Trump-funded or Trump-endorsed candidate who ran against them, they now have to kind of pivot in the general election to look more mainstream. So people like, what's his name in Nebraska, who came out yesterday against Trump and decided, I'm done with him now. That's one of the most Democratic areas in all of Nebraska. That district went for Obama twice. It went for Biden in 2020. So, and they had the primary election on the May 10th. So the guy's got to pivot now to a general election. So I think there are a lot of Republicans who are just, I don't know, it's an opportune moment for them. They're just looking at this and thinking, I need this politically.
So the question I have for you now, are you looking at these hearings? Is this about saving the Republican Party? Because this really has been all about going after Trump and his inner circle. And a lot of these conservatives, like Rusty Bowers who I think, politically is a horrible guy. Has pushed horrible policies, as all of these people have brought bad policies and done horrible things to our country over the years. But in this moment, they stood firm on at least the principle that we should have free elections, and you should follow the rule of law at least a little bit. Is this about saving the Republican Party and just dealing with Trump, do you think?
I gotta say, I think the Republican Party is too far gone at this point. I think they have hugged Trump for too long and too closely over too many different things that I don't know how they bail themselves out of this. They've been defending him over January 6th, attacking his committee, calling it, partisan hackery. And the rest of the country has been watching it and thinks that it's important. And now they agree that Donald Trump should be indicted. So I really don't think the Republican Party has anywhere to go here. And if somebody like Rusty Bowers is willing to say, after they went after his family, they're calling him a pedophile in front of his entire neighborhood, and he's like, yeah, I'd vote for him again. And I think that does a disservice to the Republican Party. If you're willing to say, I'm fine with everything else, there's something wrong with you there.
Yeah.
There needs to be a line, and if that's not your line, if defending this democracy is not your line, then there's something wrong with you.
No. I mean, look, I've been saying this about the Republicans for a very long time. I mean, look at Ted Cruz. Trump went after his wife, and look, that happens to me. We got problems, and I'm never
Mm-hmm.
going to turn around and be your staunch defender like Ted Cruz is. And now we find out because of the hearing today, there probably is one Republican hated more than Ted Cruz, and that's Jeffrey Clark.
Yeah, no, that is. I've never in my life seen so many people crap on a guy before. I mean, this dude has no hope for a legal career in the future. Like, if he manages to make it through with immunity by selling Trump down the river, then he's got to come up with something else to do. Like, he needs to apply at Starbucks or something, because there's no way that he's, maybe the Heritage Foundation, but that's really all he's got at this point. There's no way that this dude's going to be a lawyer anywhere in the future. I'll be surprised, honestly, if he doesn't get disbarred.
They should all be all of these lawyers.
They
Sidney
should,
Powell,
yeah.
Rudy Giuliani, Eastman,
Mhm.
all of them, all down the list. Every single one of them.
I agree.
So last question I've got for you, in looking at this, anything, clearly you're someone who pays attention to this, the reporting you do at Raw Story, vital, important, good stuff. Anything shocking, anything surprising, anything make you go, oh my God, this is huge. For me, the revelation of Billy Barr going that, had he not done the preemptive investigation in the voter fraud claims, that there may not have been a transition was kind of like oh, wow, that's a pretty big statement. Anything for you?
That was definitely a good point. I think I was not surprised by that, simply because of what Mike Pompeo said in that one weird press conference where he was like, there's going to be a smooth transition to a second term. When you hear something like that from the Secretary of State, it's like, oh, there's something messed up going on here. So I wasn't entirely surprised to hear that from Barr. What I continue to be the most surprised by is that people are putting their criming in writing. I'm just like, you people have got to stop. Like, that is the one rule that Donald Trump always was taught.
Yep.
And it's the reason he doesn't email, he doesn't text message. There's a whole thing that he doesn't do because he wants to protect himself. But these people, everybody around him is writing everything down.
Well, understand what their mindset is. They all believe
Yep.
they're the next founders. They all believe history is going to remember them as great men, as great people. They wanted this for the future. They were going to be the patriots. They've sold themselves on this. And look, I know tons of people who have that mindset. That, when they were going to January 6th, they were taking videos of themselves. Hey, look at me, I'm here. Because we're patriots. We're taking the country back. And in the process, recording their treason.
Yeah, I wish I had that inflated sense of self and ego.
Yeah.
Man, that would make my life so much more entertaining. Just be like, yeah, I'm awesome. I don't need to go to the gym. But,
There you go. But it's one of the reasons we love you is you don't. And I appreciate the time you take for us and the incredible work you do. Please check out her work at rawstory.com. Sarah, always great having you. Look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Our good friend Sarah Burris. Again, make sure you check out her work at rawstory.com. She does incredible stuff. Gonna take a quick break. Back after this. Remember, if you miss any of the program, podcast. Get that wherever you get your favorite podcast, or just go to thericksmithshow.com. Also, remember, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Share your thoughts, your questions, your comments. Also, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You surprised at the criming? Not so much. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day that many labor historians mark as the beginning of a long decline of the U.S. labor movement. The United States Congress passed the Taft-Hartley Act. The bill was named after Republican Senator Robert A. Taft from Ohio. The son of President William Howard Taft, the senator had been a staunch opponent of President Roosevelt's New Deal policies. He continued his anti-working class efforts with a new bill aimed to curb the power of unions. He found an ally in Representative Fred Hartley, a Republican congressman from New Jersey. After World War II, a wave of strikes washed over the nation. Most labor unions had agreed not to go on strike during the war, but frustrations over wages and working conditions mounted. In the years after the conflict ended, 5 million workers walked the picket lines. 1 in 4 private sector workers was a union member. Labor was on the march. The congressional Republicans passed the Taft-Hartley Act in response. The bill ushered in limits on the right to strike. It also began the era of so-called right to work, allowing states to pass laws making it more difficult for unions to collect dues and represent workers. The new law also required union leaders to sign affidavits that they were not communists, bringing the Red Scare to the House of Labor. A massive rally at Madison Square Garden in New York City asked President Truman to veto the slave labor bill. President Truman did veto the bill, but Congress overrode his veto. Today, only 12% of workers are in unions. 26 states are so-called right-to-work states, to the great detriment of workers' living standards and their health and safety. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So no decision on Roe yet. I'm sure that's coming in the coming days. But the Supreme Court did decide on death row inmates being able to decide if, well, they want to get shot instead of lethal injection. In fact, it is a case of a death row inmate in Georgia who challenged the state's lethal injection protocol. He wants to die by firing squad. Now, what they're saying is it's going to make it easier for inmates to challenge their execution method. And I'm like, okay, I'm actually not entirely opposed to this. I know that, some people, oh, this is terrible. I'm against the death penalty, just so you know, right from the start. I think it's something that we should not be doing. I'm against state-sponsored murder. I vigilante justice, I can understand. Go to court, do that thing. If someone touches my kids, your kids, I get it. But state-sponsored murder, I got a problem with because it's unequal, and we can get into a whole argument about that. But this, if you wanted to die by firing squad or lethal injection, I guess you could have some say in that, some empowerment. Does that also mean that I could choose to die by natural causes? I mean, it's a method. Is this where we're going with this? I assume not. Now, me personally, I think spending a lifetime in a cage is much more cruel and unusual than putting someone to sleep. But that's what our Supreme Court decided. Also, our Supreme Court decided on, again, I love the fact that on one hand, they talk about states' rights. On another hand, they say, no, New York, you can't have a rule that makes people get permits for carried concealed weapons. I love that kind of thing. Now, the weird thing is polling-wise, the American people, they want stronger gun laws. A new Gallup poll finds 66% of Americans want laws covering the sale of firearms to be stricter, 14% from October. I think sane, rational people want there to be some guardrails in place. Our Supreme Court seems to be going in the complete opposite direction. And what's weird is you go back to the Wyatt Earp days, the Wild West days, where sheriffs wouldn't allow people to have guns in their towns. But that was okay then. I guess we can just rewrite that history whenever we so choose. I guess we can do it. But our Supreme Court shot down New York's system of issuing concealed permits. So New York going to probably be the Wild West. That wasn't. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Has our court gone too far? It's getting crazy. Also, if you miss any of the program, make sure you download the podcast. Never miss a moment. Never miss an episode. Subscribe, share, and like.
Today I'm calling on Congress to suspend the federal gas tax for the next 90 days.
President Biden seeks temporary tax cut to lower prices at the pump. Parts of the Arctic warming 5 times faster than the rest of the planet, plus
several countries have reported receiving significantly less Russian gas than what would be expected in the coming weeks.
International Energy Agency warns Europe Russia could shut down gas exports this winter.
All of those warnings and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You heard President Biden asking for a federal gas tax holiday, so how are you going to vote on this proposal?
I'll vote no.
Republicans never met a tax they didn't want to cut unless cutting it would help the American people and a Democratic president. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, you would think that Republicans would be delighted about Joe Biden calling for a tax cut, but not so much?
Yep, not so much.
Huh.
President Biden on Wednesday asked Congress to enact a 3-month suspension of the federal gasoline tax, that's roughly 18 cents per gallon, and also asked states to suspend their gas taxes or provide some other kind of relief to consumers as a way to temporarily reduce retail gas prices.
Retail gas gouging?
Now, I fully understand that a gas tax holiday alone is not going to fix the problem, but it will provide families some immediate relief, just a little bit of breathing room as we continue working to bring down prices for the long haul.
Breathing room. That's an ironic way to put an incentive to sell more gas.
Republicans in Congress are practically giddy, eager to block the concept because they believe paying for Americans at the pump will benefit Republicans politically in the midterm elections.
How unlike them.
But critics say it doesn't address the root causes of high gasoline prices, which are Russia's invasion of Ukraine, constrained refining capacity, and oil companies price gouging consumers while pulling in record profits.
Yep.
The critics also note oil companies and gas stations can simply pocket most of the money without lowering consumer prices. Biden hit back against Republicans' false claims about his energy policies, noting that domestic production is now higher on average than during the Trump administration.
Go figure.
He also noted the oil industry is shoveling profits to shareholders rather than reopening refinery capacity that was shut down during the pandemic. Long-term, suspending the federal gas tax reduces revenue going into the Highway Trust Fund for improving roads and bridges. It all underscores the consequences of America being so very dependent on oil.
Yes, it does.
And, of course, despite the record high gas prices, AAA says a record number of Americans plan to hit the road for the July 4th weekend.
Of course.
Also dangerously dependent on fossil fuels is Europe. The International Energy Agency this week warned European leaders to develop contingency plans now in case Russia completely shuts off all natural gas exports this winter. Its director said that Russia's recent reductions in shipments under claims of so-called technical issues are actually, quote, strategic, making it harder for European countries to fill up their gas storage now, increasing Russia's leverage come winter.
Yep.
In other news, a new study finds that portions of the Arctic are warming 5 to 7 times faster than the rest of the planet, much faster than previously thought due to man-made climate change, which, of course, is caused by burning fossil fuels. The Arctic matters because emerging scientific evidence links Arctic warming to changes in the jet stream, which in turn increase the frequency of blocking patterns that intensify extreme weather in North America, Europe, and Asia.
So climate change is causing the Arctic to warm really fast, and when the Arctic warms really fast, that makes climate change even worse.
Basically. But some good news.
Not a moment too soon.
The Biden administration has reached an historic agreement with 5 Native American tribes over the management of the Bears Ears National Monument in Utah. The unprecedented cooperative agreement gives the tribes, who have inhabited the region for centuries, more input in the day-to-day management of the lands. It is a big step in repairing the federal government's relationship with the tribes.
Nice. Wasn't that the national monument that Donald Trump tried to pretty much kill?
Yes. And finally, a new analysis of the global offshore wind industry by Renewable UK finds that the global boom in offshore wind projects has been, quote, nothing short of staggering, with projects in 2022 that are double the capacity of just 1 year ago. China has the biggest offshore wind project pipeline in the report, with the UK and the US not too far behind.
Well, it's nice to be not too far behind for a change. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you
of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the big question, I'm getting tons of emails from folks about, the hearings are important, yes, but hey, inflation's high, gas prices are high, I'm struggling. Yeah, we care about democracy, but the kids got to eat, and it's true, got to do something. And the question is, did Joe Biden do this? Is this all Joe Biden's fault? Did he raise prices? Is there a super secret switch in the White House that raises prices? Did he do this on purpose? Did he do this to make your life miserable? And the answer is no. I guarantee you Joe Biden doesn't want you to struggle economically. In fact, trying to do everything they can do within the confines of our democratic system with divided government to try and move that stuff forward. I'm here to share some thoughts on maybe how we address some of these problems, find out what's contributing to the higher prices at the checkout line, and maybe what we do about it. I've asked Mike Mitchell to come talk with us. He's the Director of Policy and Research at the Groundwork Collaborative, their website, groundworkcollaborative.org, where they do incredible stuff. Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So I'm getting tons of emails from people going, Joe Biden. It's all Joe Biden. All of this, it's all Joe Biden's fault. It's all the Democrats. The economy's in the tank. Things were so much better when Donald Trump was in office. The economy was humming on all cylinders. There was nothing but gold and honey in the streets. Prosperity for everyone. It was beautiful. It was nirvana. It was paradise. It was utopia under the Orange Menace. And Joe Biden screwed it all up?
Yeah, no, not at all. And I would say a couple of things on that front. One, you kind of alluded to this a minute ago. Joe Biden most certainly does not have a button that raises prices. And, if you were to think about why prices are going up right now, this would not be a story. I mean, it's certainly a story about the pandemic. And a lot of the issues that we've heard about with supply chains and whatnot, but it's actually an issue that is even longer in the making, where you're talking about deregulation of certain industries, where now we see high levels of concentration, where corporations can do whatever they want in terms of raising prices, squeezing their suppliers, squeezing consumers. You're talking about a lot of policies where workers don't have the kinds of power that they need to go in there and negotiate with their corporations. And you're talking about a regulatory environment where when there are bad actors, we have no recourse. And so now we have a present day where a pandemic happens. Corporations can do whatever they want because there is no accountability and no transparency there. Workers don't have the power they need to push back. At the end of the day, the supply chains that we're working with are so brittle because they're all in the hands of corporations who are cutting corners at every chance they can. Of course, we see shortages, we see the inability of private sector to meet demand, and prices go up. We'll get into this, I know, but it then calls into question why, when we turn around, we say, okay, we've got rising prices, let's talk to the Fed.
Yeah, and then the Fed does the one thing that they know how to do, and that's break out the hammer and smash things by raising interest rates and slamming on the brakes. And by doing that, they know they're going to cause pain. And out of it comes, someone who I despise, Larry Summers, coming up with probably one of the most idiotic comments ever, saying, "Well, maybe we need high unemployment for a bit of time," which I wish someone would tell him to shut. There are moments in doing FCC regulated radio, and look, I'm a big fan of regulations, but this is one of those moments where I would like to deregulate the FCC for a moment so that I could truly express how much I disdain Larry Summers. But I'll just let that go for there. But F. Larry Summers, and in a big way, F. Larry Summers, because I think a lot of the problems we have in this country are because of how wrong he has been and how wrong neoliberals have been on every economic policy, and the Fed slamming on the brakes and wanting high unemployment being part of that. Just my thoughts. I'm curious. I'm curious if you'd like to weigh in on that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I would say the FCC approved way of communicating what you were just saying is that I think Larry Summers' comments that, you could either get inflation under control with 1 year of 10% unemployment or, 5 years of 5% unemployment are not only irresponsible, but it means hardship for millions and millions and millions of Americans. It means that families can't make ends meet. It means, first of all, if you break this down by race, if he's talking about a 10% unemployment overall, that's usually we're talking about for Black folks about twice the magnitude. I mean, almost 20%. That would be like Great Depression levels of unemployment you're talking about for a certain segment of the population. I mean, to say those kinds of things as a legitimate policy solution or to suggest them when you have the kind of platform that he does shows a level of irresponsibility and callousness that I think is actually dangerous and should not be seen as a legitimate part of the conversation about how we solve this. Yeah.
Is there any way to make Larry Summers unemployed?
I will say this. Earlier today, I had to refrain myself from tweeting something about, we would actually have much more of a better chance of getting inflation under control if Larry Summers had a personal unemployment rate of 100%.
See, I'm all in favor of that. There's a policy I can get behind because look, the reason that I have such disdain for Larry Summers, much like I have for Milton Friedman, is these are people who have brought economic policy to the mainstream of working class thought that has done such damage to the working class. They've brought us horrible trade policies. They've brought us horrible deregulation. And it's almost now been drilled into the working class of this country that it's almost now a norm that we believe that we need to give tax breaks to corporations so that they'll create jobs. We need to deregulate so that, but they'll police themselves and act in their own best interest. We need to have these trade policies that allow jobs to go overseas because, this is how we do things. At some point, we've got to push back on stupid and go, no. As a working class, we should be demanding I don't know, the kind of things my grandparents' generation fought for. A prosperous working class that demanded worker-centric policies that we voted on. Not this kind of idiocy that we're stuck with right now that's really ripped us to shreds.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and even in the context of inflation, one thing that I've heard in conversations that I think have been really productive is that oftentimes we think of inflation as there's either too much demand or wages are rising too much. And that means that corporations then have to raise prices, right? We think of it as this kind of clear A plus B gives you C. That's not the case. Inflation isn't just some discrete thing. Inflation can emerge from a whole range of different things, like, I don't know, a pandemic, where we have these huge supply chain issues where corporations aren't able to get their goods to market, where workers, fearing for their own safety are actually saying, actually you might have to pay me a little bit more to go in, to your manufacturing plant where the safety conditions have never been up to standard, but now are like especially life-threatening. And it feels like there's this disconnect from being able to understand what's actually happening in this moment and driving up prices from then like the economic 101 textbook description of why prices rise. And it's leading us to go towards the solutions that actually will not address the things that are happening right now, but will lead to, as you said, the most economic damage to the greatest amount of people who also happen to be the folks who at every turn are always the folks who end up getting the shaft.
No, and this is where you got to give that school of thought, the Chicago School of Economics thought, you've got to give them credit. They've pushed their poison in every economic school across the country. They've taught every working person this. We're so smart. We've learned so much that we know so much that's wrong. And this to me is a huge part of it. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Mike Mitchell. Mike is the Director of Policy and Research at the Groundwork Collaborative. You got to check out the incredible work that they do at the Groundwork Collaborative. Check out their website, groundworkcollaborative.org. They've also got another website that I want to make sure we promote, endcorporateprofiteering.org. Really important to take a look at this. We'll get links out as well. Now, you talked about supply chains and how broken our supply chains are, and how this is a huge driver in what's going on. And I absolutely agree. This was coming pandemic regardless. Our manufacturing prowess has been gone for years. There's I don't know if you know Trenton, New Jersey at all, but there's a bridge in Trenton. On the side of it, it's got, Trenton makes the world takes in giant lights. It's a famous bridge. That's not true anymore. But that used to be the world we lived in. We've given that manufacturing capacity away, and we've been giving it away for decades because of our horrible trade policies brought to us by people like Larry Summers and people like Bill Clinton and Milton Friedman, and the bipartisan consensus in Washington that goes, hey, let's corporate America run the country, and maybe we at the bottom will benefit somehow. That hasn't happened. So for me, this is this moment where as a working class, and I don't care right, left, center, gay, straight, male, female, black, white, I don't care where you are on the working class spectrum, this is where we should be uniting around demanding returning our manufacturing capacity back to our shores. This isn't on the horizon. This is up down. This is the wealthy versus the rest of us. This is the 1% versus the 99%. And we better figure this out quick, because we're getting screwed at every turn.
I think you're totally right. And I mean, there's clearly the economic security, perspective of this, right? And the mantra, and this is just very, very simplified, but I think the mantra for a long time was, we will trade cheap electronics, right, for quality jobs. We basically said we're going to get rid of quality jobs, but hey, things will be cheap. Well, the reality is, for a lot of folks, things were actually never cheap. So that was a lie even then. But in this moment, we're realizing that for many more people, things aren't cheap, and corporations are still going to go, take their money to the bank. So that economic security piece is totally real. But there's also this other piece that I think we haven't actually ever really grappled with, is that having domestic capacity to build things is actually important to our own health and safety. We have this whole baby formula epidemic or issue right now, where folks can't find the nutrition they need to keep their babies alive. We have very few plants, very few companies in this country that can do that, right? Think about one of the solutions that the administration had to do to make sure that folks could find things. They had to import from another country, from other countries, from Europe. If we had more domestic capacity, if we actually invested more in more companies being able to do that here, that's an issue that we would not have.
Right,
go ahead.
If I could stop you for a second, this is reimagining our entire economy. We've deferred to the quote unquote smart people for way too long in our business schools, who said, no, we need consolidation. We need specialization. We all learned about rice and beans. We all learned, in school, the country that makes the most rice, they should do all that. And the ones who make the most beans, because we'll all be better off. Well, we're not all better off, because the people who make all the rice and all the beans take all the profits. And we end up getting stuck with, neither rice nor beans. And this is where we are, especially in this moment. When we had a broad-based economy where you had, as you pointed out, using the baby formula, when you had multiple factories and multiple companies competing against each other, that was a much better situation than having four controlling 90% of the market in this country. And when one goes down, you're totally screwed. This is all because, hey, we let the smart people run things, and we walked away from regulation because, job-killing regulation. No. The lack of regulation killed millions of jobs in this country by allowing them to consolidate and centralize. That's a problem, and it's something we got to talk about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's important to point out, workers domestically, workers internationally get screwed, in either direction, right? We're talking about workers, period. The idea was, let people go manufacture things in somewhere else where they can pay people pennies, right? And so I think that's important to recognize, that the only people that really have benefited long term or in any kind of sustainable way have been the corporations that have been allowed to do this.
Oh yeah, no, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
Look, Reagan forward. Thanks to all of his massive tax cuts, because I like to remind people, when Reagan took office, the top marginal tax rate in this country was 70%. When he left, it was all the way down to 28%. And we created the largest billionaire class in the history of civilization, with the most massive redistribution of wealth from working people to, well, our handful. Because we've now got about a little over 1,000 billionaires, and we've got more people in poverty and more working people struggling, which is why, again, we're such a divided country.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think, and that, not to, bring this full circle, but then, to add insult to injury to how people are struggling today, juxtaposed against this kind of billionaire class, which, by the way, over the course of the pandemic, one of the things that we saw was just massive transfers of money and wealth to this billionaire class in this time of crisis. But more broadly, what we've seen, to add insult to injury, is then when we're trying to fix the problem, the problem is actually that people like you and me, workers, have too much money, or the demand is too strong, right? And so it is just continuing to self-feed into this narrative that don't look up, don't look at the top, it's you. Yep. It's what you have. It's the fact that you have the gall to want to put food on the table for your kids, or you have the gall to, try and find an employer that will pay you, what you deserve. And that has created significant roadblocks, and it's the greatest challenge to kind of broadly shared economic, prosperity that we face right now. Is that narrative?
It's in the Republican rhetoric. Joe Biden gave too much money away. He gave $1,400 to everybody. That $1,400 evidently is all this inflation, because you and me, we have a little bit of money in our pocket. Evidently, that's what the claim is.
Yeah.
The trillions that Trump gave to the billionaire class, that didn't cause any inflation. The hundreds of trillions we've given away over the decades to our wealthiest, not a problem. But the second we want to make sure that there's food at the end of the month for that kid growing up in the housing project that I grew up in, that's a bridge too far.
Yeah. And I think that, that's exactly the moment then where we need to be talking about, how do we continue to tax, wealth? How do we look to break up, mega corporations? How do we put in place the kinds of regulations that ensure that, corporations aren't taking advantage of their workers, aren't taking advantage of consumers? How do we make sure that these big corporations aren't just shifting all their profits overseas and dodging taxes, and really try and rebalance power through good public policy? I think if you did those things, if you focused on those things long term, you would do much more to create an economy and to address rising prices than you will just by killing your economy over these really onerous interest rate hikes. Lawmakers have to accept some of the responsibility for getting this under control, and not just look at the Fed to try and clean this up in probably the most harmful way possible.
No, I'm with you. So last question I've got for you. Because I love what you're saying, and I agree completely. This has got to be a bottom-up movement of reimagining what our economy is and what we should expect from our economy. Because for too long, it's been about feeding Wall Street and feeding the ultra-wealthy. And look, this pandemic has highlighted that. So what should folks be doing? What are the marching orders going forward? Look, for me, this is a moment that, I don't care if you're on the right, the left, center, I don't care where you are. This is an issue that should be uniting us. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. So things that I think have really encouraged me as of late. One of them is it feels like we are seeing a resurgence in some pockets of our economy of workers who are trying to organize. I think that is one of the most important steps that we can take to rebalance power away from corporations and more towards working people, right? Because unions are not only just critical to ensuring that your employer doesn't take advantage of you, but unions then become a hub for political power, right? They are an avenue for everyday people to communicate their needs to their representatives and to actually be a counterforce to all of the corporate money, all of the wealthy money that goes into these things, right? So I think that organizing is critical. I think that's one. Two, as I was just saying, for the things that are on the table right now in terms of legislation, I think lawmakers really, really need to be thinking about How do they tax wealth more? How do they tax corporations more? How do they break up corporate power? Because when they do those things, when you tax wealth, and you know, we used to, I forget who said this, and I would love to credit them, but one person said, you know, even if you put a wealth tax in place and you used all that money and you just lit it on fire, you would do more to restore democracy than you would by just, just by letting all that wealth continue to siphon off to the wealthy, right? Because all that money that they amass is just power that they funnel back into, amassing more power. So if we can think about taxation as a major tool in rebalancing power in our democracy, I think that we would be much better off. So I would say, for folks continuing to organize, continuing to build public power, I would say for lawmakers continuing to go after corporate power and the power of the wealthy, and then continuing to create narratives where we center everyday working people as what drives our economy. Is really important, and getting away from these narratives that we first start with making sure corporations have everything they need, and we instead go from bottom up.
There you go. I don't know who said it, who you heard it from, but I've said that exact same thing.
I love it.
Because I think it's that important. But Mike, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the work that you guys do. I hope you'll come back and share some more with us in the days ahead. Good stuff, man.
All right. Absolutely, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff. Mike Mitchell, he is the Policy and Research Director there at the Groundwork Collaborative. Make sure you check out their website, groundworkcollaborative.org, and also the other website, endcorporateprofiteering.org. Check that one out as well. We'll get links out on social media. We'll take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I really like Mike. I think he is spot on the right path. And like I said, look, I think the Fed is making all the wrong choices. I think raising interest rates is a bad idea in this moment, especially as aggressively, because they're going to cause unemployment. It's going to harm people, and that's part of the pitch. I mean, they need a recession. The folks at the top. To cause the kind of economic pain, to force people back to work, to force people to just be grateful that they've got crummy jobs again. Yeah, I mean, this is predictable, and sadly, the organizing that needs to happen, I fear could be crushed. Now, I have some hope because the younger generation, I don't know that they're going to put up with it. The younger generation, to their credit, is saying, "Look, we're not going to go back to the horrible days. We want better. We want an economy that's going to work for us. We want an economy that's going to provide good jobs, good security. What I remember my grandparents fighting for and telling me the stories of. They don't want to lead the lives that their parents struggled through. I mean, and this is one of those moments, as I've been saying for a while, there's an opportunity here. Every MAGA person I meet says the same thing. The wealthy are walking away without paying their taxes. That it's obscene what's going on. There's an opportunity to change the economy. There really is. We just have to seize the moment. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the program, podcast, make sure you get it. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1877. That was the day that 10 Irish miners were hung in Pennsylvania. They were part of a group of 20 who had been sentenced to death for allegedly being part of the Molly Maguires, a group of alleged radical Irish miners. Miners were on strike in the Schuylkill County anthracite coal region. The Mollies were accused of perpetrating violence and murder against the mine owners. Newspapers helped to rile up anger against the striking Irish miners. A Pinkerton detective infiltrated the group, and his testimony doomed those he accused to the gallows. Since the hangings, many have questioned his testimony and the cases made against the miners. But at the time, many newspapers celebrated the hangings. On the day of the executions, the New York Tribune called the men, quote, the wild beasts of the collieries of eastern Pennsylvania. The Carbon Advocate of Lehighton, Pennsylvania, declared the majesty of the law has been vindicated. The community breathes more freely now that these men who feared neither the laws of God or man have met their doom. The day has gone down in labor history as the Day of the Rope, or Black Thursday. The message of the hanging was meant to be sent to all who would dare stand up against the mine owners. In 1979, the governor of Pennsylvania posthumously pardoned John Blackjack Kehoe, one of the alleged leaders of the Molly.
Down the mines, no sunlight shines, those pits, they're black as hell. In mud and slime, they do their time. It's Paddy's prison cell. And they curse the day they try.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Right before our eyes, an invaluable American species is fast disappearing from view. Cartoonus americanus. These are newspaper cartoonists who've long delighted readers and infuriated power elites. And there's nothing natural about their sudden decline. It's not the result of a dwindling talent pool, and certainly not due to a lack of political targets. Rather, what's happening is that their media habitat is being intentionally destroyed. Around the start of the 20th century, some 2,000 newspapers featured their own full-time cartoonists. But in just the last decade, those healthy media environments have shriveled. So now, only a couple of dozen newspapers have these vibrant artistic journalists on staff. One major reason is that most U.S. papers have been gobbled up by profiteering hedge funds that have merged, purged, and plundered these essential local sources of news and democratic discourse. The overriding interest of these Wall Street owners is to cash out a paper's financial assets and haul off the booty to boost their personal wealth. Journalism and democracy be damned. Thus, they view cartoonists as a paycheck that can be easily diverted into their corporate pockets, dismissing the fact that enjoying good local cartoonists ranks as one of the top reasons people give for buying the paper. Note that this mass extermination is not old-school media censorship, but sleight-of-hand money censorship by the new monopolistic order of newspapering. Political cartoonists are still free to express any opinion they want, but the Wall Street system locks them out of their primary marketplace. Censorship is ugly, but eliminating paychecks, well, that's just business. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet these freewheeling spirits of the cartooning craft are inventing new ways to connect with America's strong demand for their fun and important work. To connect with them, go to editorialcartoonist.com. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this week our Supreme Court came up with a genius decision. And look, we've been marching in this direction for a while. The assault on public education front and center. The push to privatize, hyper-religicize, if that's actually a word. That is in the works. So when the Supreme Court ruled that state programs providing money for public tuition to private institutions can't discriminate against those poor religious institutions, I said, well, it's just another step in that direction. Not surprising that John Roberts would view Maine's program as discriminatory towards religion. It was a 6-3 decision. The three, Stephen Breyer, Elena Kagan, and Sonia Sotomayor on the dissent. Evil dissenters, anti-religion. It's crazy where we're going, but this is where the Education Incorporated people want to take us, the Jeffrey Yaz's of the world and the big money who want to destroy public education and privatize and, well, make it for the worthy, and however you want to put that. But here to share some thoughts on this decision. Is this as big a deal as I think it is, or is this just one more in the 1,000 paper cuts of the death of public education? I've asked Mary Catherine Ricker to come talk with us. She's the executive director of the Albert Shanker Institute. ShankerInstitute.org is their website. Mary Catherine, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Rick. I appreciate it.
So, I'm looking at this and I'm going, this seems like a big deal. Seems like now we're going to be taking tax dollars, handing it off to religious groups to educate kids in whatever they're good. Is this a big deal? Let's start there.
It is a big deal. And I actually think it's a big deal for a number of different reasons, right? One, you alluded to it already. It is a big deal when we're talking about strengthening our public schools and we get a ruling like this. But I also recognize that it is a big deal because this is probably the most pro-religious Supreme Court we have had, certainly in the modern era. I was just reading this morning about a report that a professor at Washington University in St. Louis put out, Lee Epstein. He said that the Roberts Court is ruling in favor of religious organizations when they bring issues to the Supreme Court 85% of the time with this ruling.
Wow.
So it is. It absolutely is. It is a call to action for supporting our public schools. And there is something bigger going on, and it has been happening for a while. And it is up to us to pay attention and figure out what that means for us as a society that believes and was raised on this idea of a separation between church and state.
No, this is even bigger than the Roberts Court sides with corporate America. They're decidedly on the side of religion. And I would have to argue, which religion? Now when you start talking about religious freedom, because I hear this a lot, it's about religious freedom. Would they be so gung-ho if we're talking about Muslim charter schools, if we're talking about, who knows what? Because, look, I'm not anti-religion. There's a place for that. There's a place for the individual to have that. It's just not in the public sphere. It's just not with the public tax dollars. And that's where I come down on the side of education should be in the hands of the public. If you want to educate your child in religious ways, that is your right. That is your responsibility. That's on your dime.
That's right. That's right. You can find those opportunities. As someone who was educated in my public schools, my parents still found ways to involve me in religious education that they chose. And we were very proudly supporting our public schools at the same time. That arrangement there are millions and millions of children, young people, who had that same experience. The focus is supporting our public schools, making sure there are strong public schools, and that's what separation in church and state that we were raised on has been about. That you have the freedom to choose your religion, to worship where you want to worship, and that the state is going to provide things like a high quality public school for every child.
Now, what do you say to the person? Because I got into a back and forth via email with someone who said, well, this is a special situation. This case in Maine, very special, very, very highly chosen because evidently there wasn't a public school in the area. The tax dollars were given to private institutions that were in the area that filled the void of the public school, and that the religious schools were excluded solely because of their religion. Does that matter?
I think, having been a state commissioner of education and having a lot of respect for all those state superintendents and commissioners of education who have to work with their, other elected leaders, their governors, their legislators, their school boards, to determine how you meet the needs of your students. And knowing that you are committed, you have a responsibility to maintain strong public schools. I trust that Maine was trying to figure out what to do about very rural spaces, sparsely populated areas, for example, that still had young people who still needed a secondary education. And Maine was trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
It is important to note that when Maine went down this road, one of the things they put into place is that any private school that participated, one, they needed to apply annually, right? So there was an expectation that you actively joined in this program if you wanted to participate. And they had to meet the standards of an equivalent public education, including non-discrimination laws. And so that was in place. And it is worth noting, this was reported by the Wall Street Journal earlier, that the parents who challenged the exclusion of Bangor Christian schools, the Bangor Christian schools publicly states that they believe God has ordained distinct and separate spiritual functions for men and women. The husband is the leader of the home, and men are to be leaders of the church. The school considers homosexuality immoral, and its curriculum seeks, among other goals, to refute the teachings of the Islamic religion and determine a Christian framework for determining and executing foreign policy. Right. So clearly this school would not have qualified had they even applied, but both schools have publicly stated they wouldn't accept the funding if they were required to alter that curriculum. They are publicly stating that they are in favor. So we need to be clear,
right,
that this, the question here is, do we believe that a public school should be a safe and welcoming environment for every student? And Maine, in deciding to have gone this direction, they decided that if a school were to participate, they expected that school to be just as responsible to non-discrimination laws and make those schools safe and welcoming to every child.
That's an excellent point. No, that's an excellent point. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Mary Catherine Ricker. She's the executive director of the Albert Schenker Institute. You want to check out the work they do, schenkerinstitute.org. I want to hit on that point for a second because I think it's really important. Because I remember, it just popped into my head. Back, high school history class 1,000 years ago. Learning about Madison, and one of the first things that he argued against were money for religious institutions, not because he thought there shouldn't be public money going to religious institutions, but because he thought that the money would corrupt the religious institutions. And this is kind of one of those things where you go, by having all of those things that you just talked about, having to agree with things that you may claim you're completely against, you would have never applied for the money anyway. So, I mean, this seems like this was brought solely just to look for trouble that you would have never applied for it anyway.
This really feels like it is just another step in a direction that I would caution them to continue going down this road. You are absolutely right, and that that separation of church and state that we were all raised to believe was one of the fundamental beliefs of our democracy, was meant to keep our state strong and keep our religious institutions strong, and make sure that the state did not unduly influence religious institutions, and religious institutions did not unduly influence the state. And so this is an attack on our public schools. But it also threatens religious institutions and organizations by opening them up to state influence as well.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Because my mind is not working through all of the where I think things are going, and I actually know people who they're working on the plan. At least where I'm at in Pennsylvania, they believe that we should just destroy public education as a whole. That education should be like a competitive thing. We should have choice. I love my pro-choice families. That every kid should have a dollar amount fixed upon their head, and that parents should be able to choose where they're going to take their child's dollars. And if they choose to keep those dollars for themselves and homeschool, that they should then be paid. And I know my quiverful crowd, they're all quiverful over the idea that they may get to have a brood of children and then reap tax benefits from that. But for me, that seems to be the ultimate goal. Do you think that plays into this decision at all? Do you think this is part of that? Or do you think I'm just crazy?
I think there are people who see this who saw this lawsuit in the first place, and then certainly see this ruling as a step in that direction. And I actually think it is a great time for those of us who truly believe that public schools are the foundation of our community, the foundation of our democracy, to also reflect on ourselves and where do we still have power. This ruling may have knocked the wind out of us for a moment, but we got to take a deep breath. And we've got to figure out where we still have power, right? We still have the power to tell our elected officials, the elected officials we have today, right now, that we expect them to invest in our public schools. We have the power this November to elect pro-public education candidates. Right? We have the power to ask everyone who's running for public office how strongly they believe in our public schools and what their ideas are to work in partnership with families and students and teachers and principals and paraprofessionals and the community to strengthen each community's public school. And so this is one of those moments where while I may steel myself to a ruling like this, while I may get the wind knocked out of me, I'm gonna invite you as well to just all of us to take this opportunity to remind ourselves where we still have a great deal of power, and then roll up our sleeves and really unleash that power.
Yeah, and where I want to take this also is, look, by bringing this up doesn't mean I'm anti-religion, and I don't care what your religion is. That's a private thing. That's between you, your maker. It's between you, your four walls. That's your thing. I'm talking about education being part of the community space, something that we should all be wanting to strengthen as part of what we all do. And religion, this shouldn't be part of what the education space is. And what these folks seek to do is destroy that common space and use religion as something divisive. And that to me is one of those things that's really angering, because I was always raised to believe that religion was supposed to make you better. Your faith was to make you, calling to make you be a better person, not rip you apart and cause more division. So for me, this is just more moving us down that track of division and tearing us apart.
I completely agree. I am worried that there are going to be many unintended consequences of this decision, and as well as, to your earlier point, perhaps some intended consequences as well. And with this idea, again, as someone who was raised understanding that the separation of church and state was healthy both for church and for state, right? For your religious, it was just as healthy for your religious institution as it is for your government. That there are real concerns we should have as we continue to erode that separation of church and state.
I'm with you. Lastly, I got to get your thoughts. The big AFT convention's coming up in Boston. We're going to be broadcasting from Boston, the couple of days of talking to educators, talking about issues like this one, others. I'm sure the CRT, that theory about race that might be critical, I'm not sure. That's going to probably come up. Arming teachers, something else we're going to talk about, I'm sure. You going to be packing heat at the big convention, and something you're going to be putting in your onboard duffel bag there?
I am going to be promoting democracy, voices for workers in their workplace, and strengthening our public schools. That's a pretty potent combination, quite frankly.
So are you going to be at the convention? Are we going to get to be able to sit down and see you there?
I will be. Yes, I'd love to see you there.
Looking forward to it. But Mary Catherine, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the work that you guys do there at the Albert Shanker Institute. As always, great stuff.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate seeing you. Take care.
Thanks so much. Have a great night. We're going to take a quick break. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, if you have a thought on this. Should the Supreme Court have done this? Is this another step towards the end of public education, or is this just one more little thing? rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1877. That was the day that 10 Irish miners were hung in Pennsylvania. They were part of a group of 20 who had been sentenced to death for allegedly being part of the Molly Maguires, a group of alleged radical Irish miners. Miners were on strike in the Schuylkill County anthracite coal region. The Mollies were accused of perpetrating violence and murder against the mine owners. Newspapers helped to rile up anger against the striking Irish miners. A Pinkerton detective infiltrated the group, and his testimony doomed those he accused to the gallows. Since the hangings, many have questioned his testimony and the cases made against the miners. But at the time, many newspapers celebrated the hangings. On the day of the executions, the New York Tribune called the men, quote, the wild beasts of the collieries of eastern Pennsylvania. The Carbon Advocate of Lehighton, Pennsylvania, declared the majesty of the law has been vindicated. The community breathes more freely now that these men who feared neither the laws of God or man have met their doom. The day has gone down in labor history as the Day of the Rope, or Black Thursday. The message of the hanging was meant to be sent to all who would dare stand up against the mine owners. In 1979, the governor of Pennsylvania posthumously pardoned John Blackjack Kehoe, one of the alleged leaders of the Molly.
Down the mines, no sunlight shines, those pits, they're black as hell. In mud and slime, they do their time. It's Paddy's prison cell. And they curse the day they try.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So, I go back to what Mary Catherine Ricker was talking about. Look, it's easy to go, you're just anti-religion. No, not anti-religion. I want you to believe what you want to believe. I want you to pursue what you want to believe. I hope, and this is one of those things that, I still kind of cling to a little bit. The hope that religion's going to make people want to be better human beings, want them to be nicer to each other, to be kinder, to follow the tenets of whatever faith that they seem to want to follow, which generally a lot of them have the same kind of things. Be nice to each other, don't steal from each other, don't kill each other, don't cheat on each other, don't lie, don't do the things that, well, a lot of our religious folks seem to be doing a lot of. Lead a decent life. If you're not going to, live by the golden rule, at least live by the silver one. Don't treat me any worse than I want you to treat me. And this decision to me is the wrong one. Now understand, Robert's justification is that the sole reason that they went this way is because, well, they discriminated based solely on the religious part. And look, we've said, keep your religion to yourself. If you're teaching about math and you're teaching about science and this is if you're an academic institution, then that's that. But the second you throw this other stuff in, that's not what the public dollars are for. There's a place for that. It's called a church. That's where you do that. And the church shouldn't want it either. And I go back to, like I said earlier, I remember, when I was in high school, it was either I think it was actually Madison, who, was like dead set against the use of public money for religious purposes. Not because they were against, using public money in religion, but because it was going to corrupt the religious institutions. It was going to corrupt their values and their direction. And this is where, and I'm glad Mary Catherine brought this up, these schools probably wouldn't have applied for this money anyway, given the fact that there were strings attached, as there always are. So in order for you to get these resources, in order for you to qualify for these programs, you have to agree to these certain tenets. And maybe this is where things are going to have to start, the devil in the details a lot more, I guess. Because when Mary Catherine was laying out, what this school stood for, it sounded an awful lot like the Republican Party of Texas and their platform. And you go, is that what we want our tax dollars to be going towards? No, I'm sure there are a segment of people, sure, the MAGA hat wearing, mouth breathing Q kooks, sure, I'm sure that's what they want. They want to have a bunch of little inbreds who are breathing the same kind of fire. But the mass of society shouldn't want ideologues. We want critical thinkers. We want people who are going to be able to take knowledge, filter it, and use it appropriately. Now, sadly, and this is where my fear of religious extremism on any sect, and I'm not talking about any particular one view. Extremism is bad on every front. But once you start cookie cutting out these little extremists, what you then end up with are very narrow-minded thinking people and very dangerous policy-wise thinking people. Very intolerant kind of people. And I fear we've been heading down this road for a while. This level of intolerance on all sides of the political spectrum. Religion was supposed to be that place. I remember growing up hearing, hate the sin, love the sinner. Now it's no. Now it's, hang them. We're heading into some really troubling territory. When the thing that's supposed to calm us, the thing that's supposed to unite us, the thing that's supposed to want us to aspire to be better, the thing that's supposed to make us, answerable to something more, is what makes us worse. Do you not see that as a problem? And education is supposed to be one of those things that makes us think differently. Education is supposed to be one of those things that expands our mind, not narrows it. So for me, when I see this, my mind goes, scary times ahead. If we're going to start using tax dollars that we are to use in education to continue to push narrow-minded policy, that, my friends, that's frightening. And we should all be pushing back against it. So this decision, frightening. But again, not surprising. And as Mary Catherine pointed out, the reality, when it comes to religious decisions in this court, 80% they side on the side of religion. That's even more than the 75% they side on the side of corporate America. Wow. Fun and entertainment ahead. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, the ricksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between, wherever there are podcasts, I'm sure you will find ours. It's there for you. Also, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. Something I said got under your skin. Most certainly love to hear it. Angry stuff to the top. Thanks for being here. See you next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show.